Hello, it's Anton from the PC Report once again. So the next kind of more minor party which we're going to have a look at is we're just going to have a look at the Trade Unionist and Socialist coalition. So these chaps, and I must admit I've got a bit of a soft spot for these guys, so I might be a bit biased, but I'm going to try and be as kind of like fair as possible about them. So yeah, let's just dive right in. In the series of minor party leaflets that we're going to have a look at. So this for the Glasgow region, as I live in Glasgow. So elect Brian Smith, a socialist fighter for Glasgow. Vote Scottish Trade Unionist and Socialist coalition on the Glasgow region ballot paper. We need a socialist recovery for the working class. So the horrors of COVID have exposed all that is rotten about profit-driven capitalism. The bosses are billions richer than they were before the pandemic started. Yep, that's a big issue. I think that's a big kind of a big factor behind people thinking who weren't necessarily like, oh, we need to reform the system. To be like, yeah, but how has this kind of class of person profited massively? While so many other people have lost their jobs, or especially the young and that. So yeah, that's a big issue. Good that he's hitting it. Yeah, inequality is soaring. Food bank queues are getting longer, and unemployment is set to double. Yeah, right around the corner from me, there's a food bank, and you see queues kind of around the block and stuff. And it's, we always kind of say, in Soviet Union there are bread lines. Not that I think the Soviet Union was necessarily a good thing, but we've got bread lines here. We've got bread lines just around the corner from me. If that was the sign of a broken system under communism, isn't it the sign of a broken or breaking system under capitalism? Really important points here. But we know it is the working class that kept society functioning during COVID. I think that's kind of inarguable. Remember all the talk about the what's the word for it? The workers that we needed, the transportation staff, supermarket staff, cleaning staff, all these kind of like minimum wage. Well, not that they're all minimum wage, but kind of lower, especially when it came to supermarket workers and stuff. The kind of lower, income groups were actually the most important groups to us in the end, that actually kept us as a society functioning. So, interesting point. In the health and care services, supermarkets and transport, etc. Yeah, I should have just read further. That's exactly what he said. We also know the bosses and politicians of all types will try to make us pay for the billions but the pandemic has cost. Yep. It wasn't our fault. There are people who have profited from this, who should pay more. I'm not saying we shouldn't necessarily pay for it, but there definitely are sections of society that have benefited massively that should take the brunt of it. We already bailed out the bankers. I know this is different, but working people have already paid so much in this pandemic. Let's try and pay for it through other means. But yeah, maybe they'll say how they'll pay for that. We're not going back to more attacks on our jobs, wages, and public services. We oppose all forms of racism and oppression. We demand a socialist recovery for the working class based on public ownership of the economy. Man, yeah. Well, I've got a soft spot for these guys, I can't lie. So yeah, very, very, in case it wasn't obvious, very left wing. This is kind of what people always accuse kind of mainstream parties of being far left, and it's like, no, they're not. When the Labour Party gets called far left, it's like, really, not. No, they're just not. If you look at actually where they stand on a lot of things, but this, is very kind of traditional, if not far left, further left. So they're kind of like public ownership of the economy. So that would be kind of not only bringing transportation. And transit into public ownership, but that would be kind of, in other words, bringing the means of production into public ownership. I think that's what he's saying there. Yeah, public ownership of the economy. Yeah. So yeah, these are kind of like further left than most other parties on the political spectrum. We say take the wealth from the billionaires and invest in job creation, pay rises and housing for all. I mean, the billionaires have like doubled their wealth. Well, select billionaires have doubled their wealth in this time. There should be a big tax on people who have managed to benefit from a health crisis. But I think, if you agree, use your vote to back the Scottish Trade Unionist and Socialist coalition for the Glasgow region. That's the long peach ballot paper. Elect a trade union and socialist fighter to Holyrood. Holyrood, sorry. Nice, cool. That's his blurb. Once again, just stating his values. Hopefully, he goes into more detail. I know I might have been a bit harsh on other people for not going into detail. So if they don't go into detail on this, I'm going to try and be fair and critique them as harshly as I might have critiqued some of the other parties. There's a few bullet points: pay rises, jobs and homes for all. Take the I guess he did kind of say a few. Homes for all. Take the wealth off the 1%. Yeah, these are things that we've seen among the left with growing support. The whole 1%, 99% thing, which kind of came from we are the 99%. That kind of came from the Occupy Wall Street movement back in when was that, 2010, something like that. So yeah, playing off these kind of themes, which have been prominent among the left for a while. Elect a socialist MSP who live on a worker's wage. I quite like that. I remember someone in the Labour Party, kind of on the left of the Labour Party, did that. Was it Sultana? I can't remember what her name was, but she was like, I'm going to live on, instead of, I think they get paid like 70, 80 grand or something, she was like, I'm going to live on £35,000 a year, which already is over the average wage, but and like the rest of her wage, she's going to donate to causes or social movements, whatever. So I think that's an interesting route to take. That he will be kind of like, he will not be separate from working people financially. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an interesting position to take. Fire the Tories, build a mass movement towards NUF2. Okay. I actually didn't assume that these people were an independence supporting party. That's interesting. I didn't know that. But no, yeah, build a mass movement towards NUF2. Cool. Yeah, so that's kind of organise, try and win people to the argument, things like that. Kind of keep independence in the debate and keep pushing for it. So that's interesting. So, although the Family Party and the Reform Party didn't really talk about independence, did they? Even though I think they're both anti-independence. These people, okay, that's interesting. So your Glasgow Scottish Tusk candidates. Brian Smith. Brian is the branch secretary of the Glasgow City Unison and member of the Socialist Party, Scotland. Brian has been a leading trade union fighter for years in Glasgow, helping to organise struggles for fair and equal pay against cuts making Labour, SOP and Green councillors. Ooh! I hope he kind of specifies, yeah, because we always like to talk about, quite rightly, the Tory Party making cuts, with austerity, making cuts to budgets kind of across the board, cuts to the police, cuts to just general societal, this is why libraries keep shutting and things like that. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he kind of brings up certain cuts that Labour, the SNP and the Greens have done. So that would be quite interesting, because you always hear about it from the Tories. Like, oh yeah, actually, let's see if the other parties aren't also guilty of certain things. So yeah, quite like that. And then Sinead Daly. Sinead is a socialist campaigner for women's rights against gender-based violence. What role does she have? Oh, that's cool. Interesting. I'll pardon the pronunciations on these. I don't know how to pronounce that name. Oisin Duncan. I know it's probably Scots Gaelic and it's pronounced probably completely differently to that, but we'll just call him Duncan. Duncan is a Glasgow organiser for the Socialist Students and member of the GMB Union. So yeah, once again, look, he's the main. Brian Smith is in Unison. This Duncan chap is in. It might not be a chap. I don't know. This Duncan individual is in GMB. So yeah, very, very, very in the trade unionist movement, which you'd expect from the trade unionists and Socialist coalition. But I kind of like that, socialists and trade unionists are coming together to organise. I quite like the sound of that. Maddie Jameson. Maddie campaigns for free education and the wiping of student debt. How how we've allowed fees to just treble, everything like that. It's just way too expensive. So I'm all for that. But wait, isn't it already free in Scotland? But only for Scottish people, I guess. The people like living in Scotland. Yeah, no, that's a position I support. Won't waste too much time on that. And then spot the difference. Oh, I kind of like this. So they've got the Tusk positions, the Tusk positions, and then kind of how they differ from the SNP. So this is how they come out as different. So I quite like this, that they kind of put the SNP's positions there, and then it's like, this is what this is, if you're pro-independence necessarily, maybe this is kind of focused on SNP voters. Maybe they're saying, I quite like the thought of like, look, the SNP stand for this, by voting for us, even though we support maybe independence as well, you're actually voting for something radically different. So kind of like, look, vote for us. No, I quite like that they've kind of put themselves up with how they differ in getting to maybe a similar pace of an independent Scotland. So, Tusk defied the Tories, march, strike and occupy for the right to Indie Ref 2. And then the SNP position is no Indie Ref unless Boris Johnson and or the UK Supreme Court agrees. Is that actually what the SNP position is? Because I thought the SNP position was try and get it off, obviously, Boris Johnson and the Supreme Court. But if not, aren't they still going to try? But yeah, march, strike and occupy for the right to Indie Ref 2. Quite kind of radical left-wing policies there. Well, no, I guess marching, that isn't that. But like strike and occupy, good kind of tactics. But then I guess the worry there is, but then I think maybe the worry there is you don't want to alienate people against your cause. So I think we see this with as much as I support Extinction Rebellion and all that, by it needs to be tactical, actually. So I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. I think that might be a good idea, but you don't want to become so much of a nuisance. You want to be a nuisance to the right people. If you become a nuisance to kind of working people or whatever, you risk alienating people who would agree with you. So yes, I've kind of talked myself in a roundabout. I kind of do support that. Well, whether or not I support independence or not, that is a good, that could be an effective and good tactic. So, not saying if I support independence or not. Bringing the care sector into public ownership, not to care for profit. And so that's the Tusk position, and then the SNP is leave much of the care sector in the hands of profiteering bosses. I mean, haven't SNP come out for bringing things into public? I think they might care homes into public ownership. To be honest, I don't really know the SNP position particularly well to know if that is an accurate representation of what they are. But if that is the case, yeah, bring care sector into public ownership. I see no argument for not doing that. Social care should not be a for-profit business. I'm not going to go into too much detail there because I think the video is getting a bit long. So, okay, the Tusk position, the next Tusk position is end poverty and inequality in an independent socialist Scotland. Yeah, I think we should end poverty. And it's something that's possible. Look at how all the homeless people during the pandemic were housed for the first lockdown. It is possible. We spend so much money on stupid crap, like new aircraft carriers or the nuclear program. We can afford to end homelessness like that. So. Not that they've specifically said homelessness, but end poverty and inequality. Once again, broad strokes. That is a bit broad. I kind of want to see how. But then I guess I haven't actually gotten to the end of the leaflet, so okay, I'll try not to judge. A big business, and then the SNP is a big business-led Scotland that leaves the 1% in charge. That's supposedly the SNP position. Yeah, in my opinion, the SNP should be a bit more radical. They should, but they weren't always particularly a left wing party at all. They were sort of as a Tartan Tories. So, yeah, I think definitely pushed the SNP left. And yeah, big business in Scotland. Yeah, what's the point of an independent Scotland if there isn't radical change? The SNP Labour politicians must fight austerity, not implement it. Yeah, totally agree with that. And then the SNP passed on billions in Tory cuts while in power. Holyrood. Yeah, but the thing about it is, it's like the SNP. Yeah, they did. Yeah, I kind of think that is true, but Scottish Parliament isn't in charge of a lot of aspects. So I think it would have been easier to oppose that with more powers being, they could have been more anti. I think there should be more powers devolved, which would enable Scotland to carve a new path themselves, because there's so many aspects of that Scottish Parliament doesn't have sovereignty over. They should be, which would mean that less cuts would have been passed and things like that. So, like, had it been in their control, I think this is an argument for more devolution to Holyrood, rather than anything else. Of course, I don't want to take the SNP, let the SNP off the hook, but I do see an argument for them saying, like, look, we're not actually in charge of of most things. We're only in charge of select things with our devolved Parliament as it stands. And a lot of power is still centralised in Westminster. So, but I like what they're saying. Scottish Tusk and Brian Smith demand. Okay, cool. List of demands. I love it. A 15% pay rise for NHS care workers. I think 15% is a bit, perhaps a bit high. But I mean, look, I always bring this up. But look, we bailed out the bankers. Why not give the NHS a 15% pay rise? Whether or not, then I guess the fairness thing kind of comes out. You could argue, like, would it be fair to give them 15% when other sectors of society, but then other sectors of society haven't have kind of become less, have lost money over the pandemic. There's arguments to be made there, but I think, what? I think 15% might be a bit unrealistic, but why not? Not in principle against that. But I think it is a bit, perhaps more difficult that since they have to face the brunt of this pandemic, and the NHS is in crisis. So maybe a 15% pay rise would be a good idea. Increase the minimum wage to £12 an hour as a step to 15 for all. Yep, fully support that. We need not only the minimum wage to keep up with inflation, but also to be a wage that people can actually live on. And if you run a business where you can't afford to pay people a living wage, then maybe you should become a more effective business and things like that. Because to pay people, just wages where they can't survive, they can't pay the average rent, they can't, all these things. Yeah, and I don't buy the argument that prices people out of the jobs market. Australia has a very high minimum wage, and they've got the same unemployment as the US had before the pandemic, obviously. So this would be January 2020, I think the thing I saw was. There isn't an argument for people being priced out of the economy, employment-wise. So it would be like, oh, well, if you raise the minimum wage, because it will create mass unemployment. That Australia is just an example of that not being the case. And so places like Denmark, and yeah, people should be paid a wage where they can, we shouldn't look down on jobs, service-based jobs, and things like this, where we shouldn't look down on these jobs and be like, oh, well, they don't deserve the money. No, they deserve to live with, they deserve to be able to have housing, to afford housing, to support their lifestyle and their family, regardless of what job they do. There are no unimportant and important jobs. Everyone who works full time should be able to support themselves. So, fully support this minimum wage thing being put in. The building of 100,000 quality council homes for rent. Yep. There's nothing to say about that. We need more housing. We need more council housing. For the Scottish Government to use its powers to mitigate the Tory welfare cuts and to top up benefits. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for leveraging the SNP to Sun up to the Tories. Yep, there's nothing really bad to say about that. Make the rich pay double income tax to the top 1% and raise more than 1 billion to reverse cuts. Yeah, I don't think that's particularly kind of an out there policy. I think that's I don't think that's particularly controversial, and I think the Everton window is going in that direction to where that just will be common sense. Invest billions in publicly owned renewable energy. Fight for socialist change and end the climate catastrophe. Yep. Support publicly funding private renewable energy. Publicly owned renewable energy. I don't see why that's a bad proposal. Why privatise it, and then build a new working class party to fight for public ownership of the economy and independent socialist Scotland. So that's just reiterating what they've already said. But yeah, so that is the Tusk Party. I quite enjoyed that, to be fair. Interesting. They kind of do have policies. I mean, whether or not there are some things which maybe raise an eyebrow here, but I think they kind of say what they stand for and how they are distinct from other pro-independence parties.